By the time you reach your fourth language, the work starts to feel familiar. You spot cognates instantly. You know exactly how to find a grammar skeleton and hang vocabulary onto it. You have a system that works. Then you begin learning language number 5, and suddenly that previously perfect system quietly starts lying to you. You can read a local newspaper or catch 60% of a television broadcast within months. Your comprehension is incredibly fast. But when you actually open your mouth to speak, your output sounds bizarre and entirely unnatural to locals. The mental maps you spent years building to conquer your first 4 languages are now overlapping in the wrong places. They cause high-level, invisible errors that a complete beginner would never actually make. The routines that reliably handled your previous acquisition cycles have now transformed into a cognitive liability. To understand why this happens, we have to look at what you bring to the table. We call this structural intuition. Your brain creates a foundational map of linguistic rules that carries over to every new language you study. Your physical phonological range transfers directly. If you mastered the front-rounded vowels in French, your mouth is already trained to produce sounds that monolingual English speakers spend months struggling to articulate. Grammar transfers too. If you know one Romance language, your brain already accepts pro-drop syntax. You don't need to be taught that you can drop pronouns from a sentence. That setting is already flipped on as a default. This positive transfer acts as a massive biological shortcut. You bypass the steep learning curve that traps beginners. But under the heavy cognitive load of speaking, the brain reaches for energy-saving shortcuts, and that is exactly where systemic crashes happen. Take the close cousin trap. Between Spanish and Italian, roughly 80% of the vocabulary transfers cleanly. Most of the time, this works. The problem is the other 20%. Your brain confidently fills in gaps with false friends, like using the Spanish word embarazada for pregnant, when you actually meant the Italian imbarazzata for embarrassed. This animated diagram shows how your brain attempts grammar by analogy. Think of your mental map like this shape sorting box. Familiar European grammar terms like tense, gender, and plurality drop neatly into their matching slots. But look what happens when we introduce a completely new conceptual category, like Korean evidentiality markers. Because your existing grammar map does not have a slot for this shape, your brain's immediate reaction is to skip it entirely. Because experienced polyglots have successfully guessed their way through grammar before, they confidently skip entirely new conceptual categories without realizing they are making fundamental errors. There's also a glitch called recency bias. The language you finished most recently, not your native tongue, exerts the strongest, most disruptive pull on your pronunciation. This graph shows pitch contour. On the left, Mandarin tone operates strictly at the syllable level, tightly confined within a single block. But on the right, Japanese pitch accent requires a smooth pitch line that operates across an entire word. When your brain maps recent Mandarin habits onto Japanese speech, the structural clash marks you clearly as an outsider. Then comes register collapse. When you are pushing hard in a new language, your brain panics. You might accidentally drop formal Japanese honorifics into a casual Korean street market interaction, or apply standard textbook speech when haggling with a vendor. These overlapping maps leave you stranded on a frustrating plateau. You are technically fluent, but socially, structurally, and phonologically mismatched to the real world. To get off this plateau, the 80-20 rule of language learning completely inverts at language number 5. Because your comprehension is already running miles ahead of your production, massive input and standard grammar drills no longer work. The new strategy requires treating all transfer as a hypothesis. You need calibrated, output-first practice targeting a specific city's dialect. For example, standard Italian textbooks teach andiamo for let's go, but in Rome, you need to say andiamo. This is where StreetTongue comes in. It is a purpose-built tool designed to fix register collapse. Through custom AI scenarios and pronunciation scoring calibrated specifically to city dialects rather than standard textbooks, you get the exact data you need. Reaching a high level of local fluency requires real-time feedback, moving beyond vocabulary lists and toward the nuanced speech that bridges the gap between textbooks and the street. Use the links below to download StreetTongue. And while you're at it, drop a comment telling us about your funniest accidental language mix-up or false friend story from your travels.